Welcome to Joe College Radio. What you just heard was a recording of Jordan and I Saturday after both our teams went down. Jordan, are you feeling any better?
I'm feeling a little bit better. We lost to a great team, so it's not Alcorn State that we lost to. I guess we can do that this week potentially, but I'm hoping that that's just a good team and we see more victories as the year goes along.
Yep, well, plenty to talk about this week. Let's start it off with that game we just mentioned, or you just alluded to, rather. Arkansas, Texas A&M. How did that go down?
Yeah, it's been a great game the 2 years prior, and it was a good game this time too. Looking at the final score, it doesn't reflect that if that's all that you look at. But watching the game, it was close for the first three quarters, and for the third year in a row, we just choked in the fourth quarter, giving them 21 points. And really, it was a decently played game by the Razorback defense, but too many chunk plays. It's tough to defeat a team whenever you beat them by about 20 minutes in time of possession, but they're scoring in 1.5 minutes. So that time of possession becomes irrelevant at that point. But Austin Allen, he was a stud in that game. He went 28 for 42, 371 yards, 2 touchdowns, and again, no interceptions, a clean sheet. But the running game just couldn't get started. The defensive line manhandled the O-line all game. 40 carries for only 120 yards, which is not characteristic of an Arkansas offense. And then you have on the flip side a Texas A&M team that ran for 366 yards. And so it's hard to get anything done when your opponent is running for 300 plus yards against you. But again, our offensive line didn't do us any favors. They weren't run blocking well. They weren't pass blocking well. I would assume, just from watching that game, that out of the 42 pass plays that Austin Allen had, he probably got knocked down on his butt 30 to 35 times.
Wow.
He was on the ground for most of the game, and there were a couple of times where the audio guy was able to hear Allen screaming at the coaches on the sideline, just irate with the situation, and that's got to be fixed. You can't expect to do anything productive in the SEC if you don't have an offensive line that can hold their own, at least be somewhat productive.
Yeah, you're not going to win many ball games if your quarterback's getting knocked down every other play. It's interesting, if you looked at just like the stats and you were just put them in front of a person and didn't tell them which team was which, you would definitely think this was flipped. I mean, A&M running for 366 yards for 10 yards a carry, while Arkansas only ran for 120 is insane. And then Arkansas with three key turnovers, 3 fumbles, were just killer in that game.
Yeah, and that was really the story. It was big plays and timely turnovers for the A&M defense. I actually walked by one of our wide receivers today, Drew Morgan, on my way to class, and he was just talking about how he said something about the football gods being on our side, and we just didn't work with them. And while I thought that was a weird thing for him to say, I will say that things definitely did go our way, but we weren't able to execute off of that.
Yep. Speaking of timely turnovers, let's move on to the Oklahoma State-Baylor game, and this one was full of it. Peyton and I drove down to the game in Waco and witnessed this, and this really was a game the Cowboys should have had, and they outplayed Baylor for the majority of the game and just let it go at the end.
Yeah, and again, that's another case of chunk plays really being costly to a team that does well in time of possession, had an incredible run game. Justice Hill's got a bright future. He's going to be one of the top 3 running backs in Oklahoma State's history by the time he's done, if he doesn't leave early. But he's got a bright future.
Yeah, wow. Top 3 of all time. That's some Hall of Fame company right there. You're talking about Barry Sanders, Thurman Thomas, Joseph Randall recently. But yeah. I wouldn't go that far yet, but the kid had a monster game for sure. He was running. He had over 100 yards, averaging 6 yards a carry. I mean, he's a freshman, so the fumbles are going to happen. I mean, you hope that they won't, but he'll learn from that. He'll learn to protect the ball. He had a great game. I'm really pleased overall. Like you said before, it's really the chunk plays and the turnovers which killed us this game. I was really impressed with the game plan Mike Gundy and Mike Yursich rolled out this week. We dominated time of possession, 41 minutes to 18 minutes. We rammed the ball down their throats, which was very impressive considering the struggles we've had. But we got inside the 5-yard line twice in the fourth quarter, and each time couldn't get in. One got stuffed on 4th and 1, and then the other, Justice Hill fighting for those extra yards. And then just a great play, honestly, just a great play by the defender there to come over the top and knock that ball out.
And that's a great comment by you, because I left that out in the Arkansas analysis. There were 2 times when Arkansas, a team that's built on offensive line strength and just being able to punch the defense in the mouth and push them back, and they weren't able to do it. They had 7 plays, essentially from the 3-yard line to the 1-yard line, about 5 from the 1, where they could not punch it in. And we had all of our biggest guys in there, and we couldn't move them. You got to give props to that strong, very experienced defensive line of Texas A&M.
That can't happen if you're Bielema. But even though the Cowboys lost, I've come out of this game more optimistic than I was when I walked in. The run game finally showed up after being absent for the last 2.5 years. And the D-line had a monster game. Aside from that first drive where they gave up the 25, 30-yard touchdown run, the D-line completely stuffed Baylor's run game. Baylor only ran for 136 yards, under 4 yards a carry the entire game, and there's only 1 sack included in there. The downfall, of course, was the porous pass defense, which allowed some of those big plays.
Baylor had something close to 20 yards of completion.
It was just ridiculous. Of course, one of those was the tipped ball to the Ish Zamora. And by the way, Jim Grobe, fantastic call on the number of games to suspend the player who beat his dog. That was another case of excellent coaching by Jim Grobe. Just like whenever he went for it on 4th and 1 from his own 25-yard line. By the way, I don't know if you would have seen this, but in the post-game comments in his press conference, Grobe was trying to explain it, and he said that his headset got turned off. He flipped the off button on his headset, so he was yelling to punt the ball, but nobody could hear him, so they went for it inside their own 25-yard line.
Oh my goodness!
So just goes to show how much Grobe actually has control of that program. Little Bryles is the one calling the shots.
Yeah.
But getting back to the game, it disappointing as a fan, but hopefully, OSU will take the positives out of this, limit the mistakes. Those killer 4 turnovers, 5 if you include getting stopped inside the 5 that time. But to be honest, I'm optimistic from here on out. And
yeah, Miles, you hit it on the head. Most Oklahoma State fans didn't go into that game thinking that they were going to win. I thought that they would win. I wasn't surprised by the way that they played. I thought you'd see a little bit more from their passing attack, but they didn't really need it because the rushing attack was so effective. But they came to play, and I think that's a very bright sign. They're showing that they can compete for the Big 12 title this year, and Baylor's not going to win the Big 12 title. I think it's safe to say. They have a lot of holes, whether it be defensively or not being able to run the ball, even with 2 veterans at running back. But I can definitely see Oklahoma State winning the title if they continue to improve week to week like they have so far. And they should be 4-0. Definitely 3-1, but they should be 4-0. They had that game.
Yeah, last year you saw OSU getting all the bounces and going up on that 10-0 run they had, and this year it's been quite the opposite, with literal Hail Mary being completed to lose on a play that shouldn't have happened, and then just some costly turnovers in this game.
Yeah.
Last note, Waco is honestly a pretty trash city. It was pretty ugly. And also
that's shocking to me.
Yeah, it was really. It's not what you'd think. The Baylor campus was very nice, but as soon as you go into downtown, kind of sketchy. You're going to keep your doors locked while you're there. And also, the Baylor crowd was not impressive at all. I have to say, the student section consistent, was getting loud, but nobody else was. And I can honestly say, I think Peyton and I were louder than the entire section of Baylor fans we were in. So they can take pride in that.
Wow. That's shocking to me. And I'm glad that you made a note that the campus is nice, because with it being a private school, I'd assume that it's nice. So that gives you some credibility on that statement. Not. Yeah, definitely. I don't know much about Waco.
$40,000 a year is going to.
Yeah, for sure.
Moving on to the next game of the week, the game day game. The Tennessee Volunteers take down the Florida Gators 38-28. And I, to be honest, I was not expecting this at all. What are your thoughts on the game, Jordan?
You know, I hope I never have to pick a Tennessee game for the rest of the year. It's the most unpredictable team that I've seen all year. And we've seen Ole Miss, who drops the ball in the second half of games, but Tennessee doesn't show up against Appalachian State, and then they throttle Virginia Tech, and then they don't show up against Ohio, only beating them by 9, and then they come back and have a dominating second half performance against Florida. It's just tough to be able to pick these games. I don't even know where to start. A 38-point second half from a Tennessee team that in most of their games this year, they haven't scored 38 points.
Yeah, I mean, one note, it was 35 point. They did get a field goal in the second quarter, but still, that is hugely impressive. They were able to come back from how far they were down. This could be a case of, Tennessee could beat anybody on any given day, and at the same time, they could lose to anybody on any given day. It's just a matter of whether they show up or not.
Yeah, my mistake. There was the field goal in the second quarter. But this Florida defense was talked about as being the best in the country, and they showed that in the first half. But I don't know, Butch Jones has got something going in the locker room. He knows how to get a good second half speech going, because he's probably got the best second half team in the country.
Yeah, obviously he is a master of those halftime speeches.
And I think he's usurped Jimbo Fisher for this season. You can't say an all-time statement, but I will say this season seems to have usurped Jimbo. So Tennessee is, since they're showing so much dominance in the second half, they're showing that they're ready to play against any team. And at this point, beating the only team that could compete with them, it looks like they can compete with them in the SEC East, they control their own destiny. And so you have a clear favorite at this point. They travel to Georgia, but Georgia looks weak right now. And Nick Chubb just got injured with a sprained ankle, so it doesn't look like that's going to be too tough for them. But again, it's Tennessee. You don't know how they're going to show up. But the only clear loss on their schedule looks to be the Alabama game. So you can see very easily this Tennessee team strolling into the SEC championship with only one loss.
Yeah, the SEC East is wide open, and putting away Florida definitely really increases their chances, especially with how poor Georgia has looked. Moving on to another coach who was great at halftime speeches, the head coach of Wisconsin, Paul Chryst. His Badgers scored 17 points in the third quarter to put away Michigan State, eventually going on to win 30-6. This is totally unexpected. Jordan, what do you make of it?
You know, Miles, I hit on this a little bit last week whenever we were doing the coverage of our predictions, and I said Michigan State, I think they're a little bit overrated, but I said the same thing about Wisconsin. So I still don't know a whole lot about these teams. I know that Wisconsin defense is legit, and they proved me wrong. But we're still a little bit questionable offense. Great running backs, though. They've got quite the stable up there, and you can thank Brett Bielema for starting that tradition up there with the three-man James White, Melvin Gordon, John Clay, all those guys. Of course, Monty Ball. But they're proving that the defense can beat the big boys, and you don't need a whole lot of offense, as they proved with only 6 points given up.
Yeah, I was expecting Michigan State to win, and at the very least put up a big fight here, because they're coming off a playoff berth last year. Even if they did get dismantled in the semifinal, they're coming off a playoff berth. They just beat Notre Dame, even though that win is starting to look a little bit less appealing with Notre Dame going down against Duke.
I would like to say,
David Cutcliffe's.
I did call that last week. I said, look out, this Duke team is tough, and Notre Dame's not exactly looking at them as a competition. So I'm very proud of the Fighting David Cutcliffes for proving me right.
Taking down another giant. But getting back to this game, if you really look at the box score and the stats, nothing really jumps out at you until you get down to the turnovers. Michigan State, 4 turnovers. They had the same problem OSU did this week, and you're just not going to win games if you turn the ball over 4 times.
Yeah. I don't care how good your third down efficiency is, how many first downs you have. If you give it up in the red zone as much as they did, or even in plus territory as much as they did, it's not going to be good for your defense and them trying to stop the offense that's always on the field.
Yeah, just demoralizing if you're giving the ball over that many times. On to our West Coast action. The Stanford Cardinal take down the UCLA Bruins 22-13, and the Bruins put up a much bigger fight than anybody would have anticipated going into this game. Had the lead in the fourth quarter. Well, they had the game was tied in the fourth quarter and required Stanford to come back and score 16 points to win this.
Yeah, it's been a crazy season, and especially for UCLA, not doing well against A&M and now coming and playing a heck of a game against Stanford. It took a fade route with 20 seconds left for Stanford to be able to pull it out. But the craziest thing about this game is the lack of effectiveness from Christian McCaffrey. He couldn't get free all day.
Yeah, it's not what you'd expect from all for somebody who's a Heisman frontrunner. I was very surprised. I thought Stanford would easily sweep aside the Bruins. Not that the Bruins aren't a good team, but just that they should be putting this game away. They should be taking care of this much earlier than they did, and it casts some doubt a little bit onto their performances for the rest of the season. Will they be able to go a whole season undefeated and make it into the playoff? If they play like this a few weeks, then they've got some opponents who are capable of taking them down.
And the Pac-12 week after week is looking more and more evenly distributed as power goes. There's not an Alabama in their conference that just looks to be far and away the best team, and same case with the Big 12. But Stanford is slipping down my totem pole of dominant teams as we speak.
Yep, they'll have a big chance this next week to prove their worth when they travel to Washington in a top 10 matchup. Last game of the day. This one definitely not as appealing on the eyes as some of the other ones, but Auburn defeats LSU 18-13 on a crazy sequence in the last few seconds as LSU seemingly throws a miraculous game-winning touchdown as time expired, and then upon further review, the officials determined that they didn't get the snap off in time. Have you ever seen anything like this, Jordan?
It's tough. Earlier in the season, we saw UConn just not even get on the ball. So I applaud LSU for making a little bit more of an effort to at least try and get the snap off. But this might go down as the craziest game of the year, and also one of the least watched games of the year. So people aren't going to know about it. But as you said, the officials ruled LSU had a touchdown, and they were going insane because they thought that they had saved Les Miles' job. And this was honestly a game to see which coach would be fired the next morning.
Yeah, I agree.
But not only was the game crazy, the aftermath. Yeah, I don't know if you heard, but there's a fan that set Toomer's Corner on fire after the game. They set one of the trees. They lit a piece of paper on fire and threw it into the trees.
Yeah, I saw that video, it's just terrible, especially after what happened to the other oak at Toomer's Corner 3 or 4 years ago when the Alabama fan poisoned it.
Yeah, and Harvey Updike, his reason was that they TP'd Toomer's Corner, because that's what they do after a victory. They TP Toomer's Corner. Two
old oak trees.
Yes, and Harvey Updike's reason for doing it was that they TP'd Toomer's Corner whenever Bear Bryant passed away, which was completely fraudulent and just a horrible excuse because that never happened. But my point with all of this is that fans need to chill. And it's clear football is just a game. It's all for fun. And we get into it, but it's not worth risking the endangerment of the public. People are getting way too serious with this. And obviously you and I are big fans of the sport, but I can say for myself and very confidently for you that we've never committed or thought about committing arson over a loss.
No, it's pretty shameful as a fan and for whatever team you represent to do something like this.
Yeah, and you do represent the entire fan base.
Yeah, so, whether you like it or not, your worst fans are going to be some of your most vocal, and they'll be the ones representing you. It's always good to just take a step back every once in a while and get some perspective. It is just a game, and sometimes in the midst of everything, we do forget that. Yeah,
and even after this, during and after the Texas A&M Arkansas loss, I was never upset. Of course I wanted the Hogs to win the game, but there are so many more important things in life than whether they win that game. And so hopefully that young man or old man or whatever age of man, however old that guy is, let's hope that he gains some perspective while he's serving some time.
Yeah, hopefully they find out who that is and give him the punishment he deserves, because that could have injured somebody for sure.
Yeah,
it may have. I just don't know.
Imagine if that had spread, if that fire had gotten big and spread. Think of all the damage to the people that were there, to the property. There's just a lot of bad stuff that could have happened, and I'm sure everyone, though they're upset, they're very thankful that it didn't end up worse than it did.
Yeah, terrible scenes after the game. Now let's get on to the big coaching news to come out of this weekend, Jordan. Florida International fires Ron Turner, the first coach of the year to be fired. Of course, I'm joking about that. He was fired, but the coaching move everybody's talking about, Les Miles, after a decade on the job, fired by LSU. I mean, everybody was kind of expecting if this season didn't go well, then he would be out of the job. But the morning after this happens, what was your reaction?
I expected it to happen. I don't know that I agreed with it, and we'll get to that a little bit more in the fan questions, but I think Les Miles is going to find a job very quickly. He's made comments that are alluding to the fact that he wants to be a head coach where he goes next. Urban Meyer said that he would be open to taking him on staff, but since he made that head coach comment, I'm not sure that Les would be up for that. But look at Cam Cameron, too, the offensive coordinator who also got fired. He might get a job before Les Miles. He's a highly coveted, highly touted offensive coordinator who didn't do anything with LSU, but before going into that dumpster fire, he was able to prove his worth on other teams. But I see no problem with Les Miles getting another job. It's sad that I'm going to have to root against another coach, whatever poor guy. Right now, the interim's Ed Orgeron, but whatever poor guy goes to coach LSU, the rest of the nation is not going to be a big fan of him. So I'm sad that the tradition of pretty much my entire life that I can remember is now ended with Les Miles' departure.
Yeah, and I'm surely he'll find a good job, whether that's being a head coach, like you said, or possibly maybe being a high-profile assistant. I mean, he is a Michigan alumnus, so
right.
Like I was telling FFOTP Luke Ginder this weekend, maybe Harbaugh convinces him to go on staff there.
Well, I wouldn't be shocked by that. I also wouldn't be shocked by USC picking him up because they're not going to be satisfied with Clay Helton's performance. Texas, they might have to drop Charlie Strong if he keeps choking in important games. If he loses this Oklahoma State game, that's not a bad loss, but then you're staring 2-3 in the face, and that's not good. So, one other destination that I could see opening up, Notre Dame. How is that not opened up yet?
Yeah.
That's got to be the biggest the biggest disappointment of the weekend is that Les Miles gets fired, who has the highest winning percentage in LSU football history, but Brian Kelly gets to retain his job. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that he's still in control of one of the nation's strongest programs historically.
Yeah, and of course, I'm sure you saw, but for our listeners, the defensive coordinator of Notre Dame fired. What's his name? Van Gordman or something?
I don't know his name, but I did see that, and there's a point where you can hire as many coordinators as you want and fire as many as you want, but at some point you've got to blame the head coach. And
yeah, I'm not going to be too surprised if Kelly's going to be out after this year, especially a 1-3 start at one of the most, if not the most prestigious football programs in the country.
And an interesting fact on that, like you said, Brian Kelly has gone 1-3 so far this year. He's done that 2 times in his 6 years there.
Wow.
Of non-disputed records in Notre Dame football history, that's only happened 10 times, and that's since 1899. 1899. And in case you were wondering, I'm sure we all remember, the 1899 season was the season when head coach James McWeeney lost a heartbreaker to the Chicago Physicians and Surgeons. It's a real story.
The powerhouse of the North, the Chicago Physicians and Surgeons.
And it was a nail-biter.
Early 1900, late 1800 football dynasty.
Absolutely. And it's sad that they kind of fell off the radar in the early 1900s, but they were a dynasty for a couple of years there.
Yeah.
Just one of my favorite teams.
Chicago's real college football team.
Right.
All right, we'll wrap up this week's games. We had a great slate, but looking forward to next week. We've got some games that promise to be potentially even better. We've got some big-time matchups starting Friday night as number 7 goes on the road to number 10 Washington. Both teams with something to prove as the level of competition gets ratcheted up here.
Yeah, and this is a game very similar to Wisconsin-Michigan State, where I look at both teams and say, they haven't proven a whole lot so far. Washington had a great chance to have a statement win against Arizona this weekend, but Arizona with Brandon Dawkins and J.J. Taylor just creating so many explosive plays, but also methodically driving down the field. This Arizona team is for real, and the injury to Anu Solomon honestly was helpful to their success. This new quarterback rushing for 150 plus and passing for 150 plus. He looks like the real deal, and watch out, because that's going to be a game that teams might have to circle on their calendar.
Arizona, of course, playing him really tough and taking him down to the wire.
All the way to overtime.
But this one here should be one that goes to the wire as well. You know, Stanford, we all expected them to blow out UCLA, and Washington, same for Arizona, but both teams, maybe we're not giving the respect it deserves. Maybe before the game we didn't give the respect Arizona and UCLA deserved, but we certainly expected Stanford and Washington to blow those teams out.
Well, and again, Arizona just had a new signal caller, and sometimes that's what you need. Based on how they had played with Anu Solomon, you could have chalked up the win for Washington just because of his incapability to move the ball down the field, but they've got something going now, and if their front 7 is anything like UCLA's, Stanford's going to have trouble whenever they face them. But yeah, this Washington-Stanford game, it's going to be interesting. Whether Christian McCaffrey can pick it up a little bit after that last game was a little bit disappointing. I'm not sure. I think that Stanford's going to walk out of that game with a victory, but it's definitely a toss-up for me.
Mm-hmm. I'll take some time and think about who I'll pick for that as well. It's a tough matchup. Next game on the slate, Texas at OSU, and this could be a season-defining game for each team. Of course, OSU coming off the close loss of the game they should have won at Baylor, and Texas had the bye this week, but of course the week before losing in dramatic fashion against Cal. If either of these teams lose, it's going to spell trouble for the rest of their season.
Yeah, this is a very intriguing game for me. I can see it going both ways, but if Oklahoma State loses, Mike Gundy's job is not in jeopardy. On the flip side, Charlie Strong, he's going to have to look out, because if they drop this one, Texas isn't such a forgiving fan base as Oklahoma State. So it's tough to see an outcome here where Oklahoma State doesn't give up a lot to Texas's offense and Texas doesn't give a lot up to Oklahoma State's offense. I think it's going to be a big shootout. But the home field advantage, it's very key. It has been so far this year, and I'm going to have to chalk this one up to Oklahoma State. I put my faith in them last week, and they performed above expectations, but not enough to get the victory. I think they pull it out this week against the Longhorns.
Yeah, like you said, even in a season-defining game, if OSU loses, Gundy is by far absolutely safe. But Charlie Strong could be coaching for his job in the Red River rivalry, just like he had to last year. And, of course, last year came up with the big victory, so we'll see. I'll be interested to see whether OSU comes up with the same game plan they had against Baylor. You alluded to it being a shootout, rather, and I think that's exactly what OSU is going to want to avoid happening. So we may see some of the same strategy with OSU trying to pound the ball and control the time of possession. And if the same offensive line that showed up in Waco last week shows up in Stillwater, then they might be able to just do that. The next game, Alcorn State at Arkansas. We're mentioning this because, of course, you go to Arkansas, Jordan, but what are you expecting? What do you hope to see at this game?
Well, Miles, I want to see a blowout, but don't be surprised if this is closer than the experts think. With Alcorn State making a bowl last year, playing North Carolina A&T, and this year they come to Little Rock, which really isn't a home game for the Hogs. We've had a lot of trouble there with inferior opponents. I mean, you could see this game going down to the wire. Unfortunately, I hope that I'm proven wrong and that they come ready to play in Little Rock, but something about that atmosphere, Hogs are not excited to play.
Yeah, I mean, not pertaining to this game, but why do they even play there? I mean, it's a long drive from Fayetteville, way away from the campus. You probably don't have that many students traveling. Why did they continue to play a game a year in Little Rock?
Well, it is worse for the students on campus, but it's a great recruiting tool to be able to go to a centrally located home game and have those recruits coming from Southeast Arkansas, Southwest Arkansas, Louisiana, just places like that where maybe they can drive instead of fly. It's easier for some people, but I agree it's not worth that. I'm sure the players can swing a flight to a potential school that's going to be paying for their college.
Yeah. Now on to top 5 matchup, and this is a huge game. Number 3 Louisville at number 5 Clemson. Now, I was doubting Louisville whenever they played Florida State. I am no longer doubting them. I am a Lamar Jackson convert. He's the real deal. And with Clemson underperforming, if Louisville comes out and plays and completely dismantles them like they did with FSU, this game could get ugly quick.
Yeah, if they play them like they did FSU, they deserve to be the number 1 team in the country. Absolutely. I mean, they will have played a tough schedule by then. And I think by the end of this game, the Clemson players, as you know, their tradition, they rub Howard's rock before the game. That's going to be Lamar's rock by the end of the game. The Clemson fans will have renamed it. They're all going to become Louisville fans. And Lamar Jackson's going to have 5 touchdowns total. And they'll pull him by the third quarter, or by the end of the third quarter.
It's like the old NCAA football graphic or the glitch whenever they're looking at the fans and then one of them immediately changes teams.
It seems like that only happens with the OU fans.
Yeah,
on the video
it's an
game.
odd glitch that only occurs whenever you're playing at
Gaylord Family Memorial Stadium.
Gaylord Memorial Stadium. Couldn't think of the name for some reason. But if they ever make games again, they need to bring back the OU fans changing shirt feature for sure, as well as the coaches ripping up scholarships and the ambulance feature.
That would be a questionable feature, but I would like to say I do want the games back. Hopefully, you EA Sports people are listening. We want the games back. We're college students, and this is what we grew up with. We want them back. We know the kids these days would love them. Let's get people excited for college football.
Yeah, make football games great again.
Yes.
Bring back NCAA.
Yes.
All right, our Big Ten matchup of the week. Number 8 Wisconsin goes into the Big House to play number 4 Michigan, and this is really Michigan's first true test of the season. And Wisconsin comes in after they've already played 2 quality opponents in LSU and Michigan State. What do you see? Do you think Harbaugh has his guys fired up for this game, or do you see the Badgers sneaking in and getting the W?
Well, Miles, I don't know that I would consider that LSU game a quality victory at this point. They pretty much had no one at quarterback. They might as well be running the Wildcat at this point. They'd have a better chance of victory than putting the backup to the Purdue backup, or Brandon Harrison, who he looks like Jeremy Johnson did 2 years ago. But I picked Michigan to be in the college football playoff, and I'm steadfast in that. I believe that they'll come to play. The Fighting Harbaughs always come to play. While they've not played the best competition, they did have a challenge against Colorado, which looks a little bit better after that win over Oregon. I definitely see an outcome where Michigan comes out on top at home, the Big House. This is the first game that the fans are really going to be pumped up for. It's going to be an electric atmosphere, and I'm sure those players are ready for it. They've had to play teams that they know are inferior to them, and now they've got a good matchup that matters for conference play.
Yeah, I agree. Wisconsin, I respect you much more than I did against Michigan State. I thought Michigan State would blow you out, but I do agree. I agree with you. I think Michigan is going to get the victory here. Harbaugh is just too good of a coach. They've got too good of players. I'm not seeing the Badgers going into the Big House in an intimidating away environment and pulling out the victory.
Yeah, not many people go into the Big House and come out alive. So I definitely see a Wisconsin team that they'll look strong, but they're not going to pull out the victory in the end.
All right, our last game we're going to preview, OU at number 21 TCU. Should be an interesting game. Both teams coming out of disappointing non-conference schedules, with OU going down against Houston and Ohio State, and TCU, of course, losing in that double overtime against Arkansas. But if Bob Stoops loses here, could we see him get on the hot seat starting the season at 1-3?
I think the moment that OU loses a single game, he's already on the hot seat. They are one of the least patient fan bases in the country, and it's because they've had so much success in the past. He's on the hot seat. Definitely not so hot that should be in fear of losing his job at this point. But if he drops that game, it's going to heat up a lot. And TCU is a team that can definitely take one away from an OU team that was preseason top 5. So, and I picked TCU as my Big 12 champion. I think that they're going to be able to compete in this game, and one of their toughest challenges early in the season was Arkansas. They're facing an OU team that really their offense hasn't looked as impressive as Arkansas has so far. While the names are there with Baker Mayfield, Samaje Perine, Joe Mixon, they haven't had the game to back it up. So as long as TCU can stay within reach in the first half, their second half is also very impressive, similar to Tennessee's. I think they'll pull out a victory as the second half goes along.
Yeah, and of course, OU's main strength lies in those two running backs, Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon. If the Horned Frogs are able to shut down the run, OU doesn't really have a receiver so far this year that stepped up to replace Sterling Shepard, who left for the NFL last year.
That has been a big problem. They don't have their go-to guy, and it's wide receiver by committee, but the committee isn't that good, to be perfectly honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Bob Stoops is the longest tenured coach in college football at the moment, and so I agree with you that Sooner fans are a little bit too quick on the trigger calling for him to be fired sometime, but there might be some genuine questions if he loses this game. I think it's going to be a tight one. Gary Patterson is going to have his boys ready to play, but I don't see OU dropping to 1-3. I'll have to take the Sooners. Begrudgingly, I'll take the Sooners in this one. I have to add that.
And think about the historic implications. If Notre Dame's 1-3, OU is 1-3, and not to mention USC 1-3. So I can definitely see OU dropping that game and having three of the most influential college football programs with some of their worst years in their history.
Yeah, and of course later in the year we've got Notre Dame playing USC. That could legitimately be a game to see which one can become bowl eligible.
Yeah,
much different from the national title implications that game has historically held.
And I think Brian Kelly should lose his job, and they should hire back the best coach in Notre Dame history, James McWeeny. He did a great job. Aside from that 5-0 loss to the Chicago Physicians and Surgeons, I thought he was fantastic in his one season as head coach.
Bring him back from the grave. Come on.
McWeeny.
We need winners at Notre Dame. Bring back McWeeny. All right, now that we've discussed Notre Dame all-time great head coach James McWeeny, let's move on to our listener questions. First, at Neil Darlene asked, pertaining to the Baylor game, was there delay fatigue, and was there a targeting call that was called but then reversed? Was that the correct decision? Sorry I didn't get to this during the game, Neil. My phone was dead. My phone was about to die, and there wasn't much service in the stadium. I could not tell if there really wasn't much fatigue from the delay. In my opinion, they only played a minute and a half of football before the lightning delay. Didn't really have too much of an impact on the game. If anything, it helped OSU because the Cowboys were able to go into the locker room and get a few plays that Baylor had run on film to see if they had thrown any new wrinkles or anything, but really wasn't any factor in terms of fatigue. And regarding your second question, the targeting call, I think they absolutely missed that call. The DB led with the crown of his helmet. He hit James Washington in the head. They correctly called it at first, and then upon further review, they ruled that James Washington was not a defenseless player, and that he was a receiver with the ball at that point in time, which I absolutely disagree with. He hadn't made a football move yet. He was being stood up by the corner that was on him, and that guy. I was waving from the third tier. I was waving at him to walk off the field, but unfortunately, they reversed that call. Unjustly, I might add. At Jim Linderman asked, what do you think about the midseason coaching changes at LSU? Are they warranted or not? Jordan, what's your take?
Well, normally, I would have to say you got to keep them for the rest of the season. It's way too tough on the players. There could be a change in the system that has to be made, but thankfully their interim is relatively acquainted with Les Miles, and so there shouldn't be too many changes. But in this case, I'd have to say, based on the recent success of interim coaches, you've got to go for it. Thinking about Clay Helton and his success as an interim coach, now that he's the head coach, his career has fallen off a cliff. But as an interim coach, he was very successful, and he might be the spark that they need to get to a bowl game.
Yeah, I agree. I do think this was warranted. FFOTP, Scott King and I were discussing on Sunday how LSU really wanted to fire him at the end of the season last year, but because of political reasons and the way it would make the university look, spending millions to fire a coach whenever the school system is coming up short on money, it just wouldn't have looked good. And then, of course, they win the last game, and the players are carrying less off the field on their shoulders
for morale's sake.
Yes, they couldn't do it then. But after starting 2-2 and another inept offensive performance from the Tigers this week, I think it's absolutely warranted. Now, do LSU fans have too high of expectations for their program? Is it right for them to consider themselves up there with Bama, and they should be competing for a national title every single year? I mean, it's tough to say, but I do think it was the right call for them to fire Les this week.
I definitely think that LSU should be competing for a national title every year with the recruiting classes that they bring in, and they have the second most NFL players in the league, right behind Alabama. So, just thinking about that, if they had coaches that can develop talent rather than just get them there, they should absolutely be competing for a championship every year, at least an SEC championship, and that's usually the gateway to the playoff.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear to say he's underperformed in that way. Whenever you have national title caliber talent sending guys to the NFL each league, you should definitely be performing better than he has. Moving on to our next question, FFOTP at Blake Broadhurst asks, does A&M have a shot of dethroning Alabama, and is it possible for the Big 12 to get a playoff team in? What's your take on this?
We can go ahead and answer this first part. Does A&M have a shot of dethroning Alabama? I mean, they have Trevor Knight, and we know how Trevor Knight comes to play against Alabama, as you saw in the Sugar Bowl a couple of years ago. But to answer your question, Blake, no. This Alabama team is totally different. They're built very, very, very well on defense, not giving up much at all. Aside from an Ole Miss team that their record does not show how great of a team they are. But you see their offense improving, and Nick Saban moving to a dual threat quarterback. It's going to be tough. That's the new challenge these days, figuring out how to stop a dual threat, and he found himself a great one.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I don't know if you can call a question a hot take, but this was definitely a hot question after coming off of the Arkansas game. I mean, they struggled. We still have to remember they had to go to overtime to beat UCLA at home. So this team definitely has a long way to go. Like you said, Trevor Knight historically is good against Bama, but I don't see them beating him.
And you can't forget the team that A&M played. Arkansas is a team that's built to beat Alabama. The way that they're designed, it's two very similarly built teams, and they look like a team. Even though they lost against A&M, they look like they can compete and possibly upset Alabama in Fayetteville. So don't give up hope on the Hogs yet. They have a bit of a bye week essentially with Alcorn State, and then Alabama comes to town.
Yeah, be a massive game in Arkansas that week. Regarding your playoff question, I just do not see the Big 12 getting a team in the playoff. It's the Big 12 is just down. They're having a down year, and really at the worst possible time with all the speculation over expansion and will the conference even survive in the next 8-10 years? But Baylor, yes, they're 4-0 right now, but they only have 63 scholarship players. The vast majority of their recruiting class this year defected. If they get any injuries, they're going to be perilously thin everywhere on their team. Texas already lost to Cal. OU is already out. You can't get into the playoff after losing 2 high-profile games like that.
West Virginia is undefeated, though.
Yes, West Virginia is undefeated.
But still, we all know they're not the caliber of a playoff team.
Yeah, they are. They are undefeated, so we'll see. Maybe they could have a special season. Maybe they could salvage the Big 12 image. But in the last few years, they haven't shown that they're capable of competing for a Big 12 title. Maybe this will be the year that they shock everyone. But no, I don't think there's any chance the Big 12 gets a team into the playoff this year.
I'd have to agree. Like you said, the only 2 teams that have a chance at this point, based on the non-conference schedule paired with the Big 12 schedule and the fact that they have no championship game, just as an extra data point for the playoff committee, I have to say that, like, with only Baylor and West Virginia left, your options are running thin. Oklahoma's schedule was built to guarantee them a spot, but dropping both of those high-profile games, it's going to be impossible for them to get in.
All right, last question of the day. at Steve K. King asks, will the suspension of Texas's most experienced lineman be the edge OK State uses to win on Saturday? If you didn't see this, Texas's offensive tackle, or guard, I believe, was pulled over this weekend, got arrested for a DWI. He has been suspended this week against OSU, and this could be huge as OSU's arguably their strongest position on the entire team is the defensive line. And Texas has a younger offensive line, and missing a veteran like him, they could be in trouble.
Yeah, if you can get after Shane Buechele early and often, that's definitely going to be a great help for this Oklahoma State defense. And he's very used to a clean pocket. So that suspension is going to prove to be costly for this Texas team. And like you said, the strength of Oklahoma State, arguably by position group, a very strong case could be made for those defensive linemen, the big boys in the trenches.
Yeah, I mean, if they are able to shut down the run, at least limit the run, and get some pressure on Buechele, the front four is going to have to be able to plug up some holes by themselves, because of OSU's porous secondary. If they give Buechele some time, he's going to be able to pick them apart. So Vincent Taylor and the crew they have their work cut out for them, but they definitely will be able to use this to their advantage, I think. All right, that wraps up this week of Joe College Radio. Thank you guys for listening. As you guys probably saw, we are now on SoundCloud and iTunes, and this week we'll be adding a podcast on YouTube. So if you are sitting at a desktop and want to pull that up, you'll be able to. Thank you guys so much for listening and spreading the word. Continue to do that. Jordan, you got anything to say?
Well, I would just like to say we really do appreciate your support, and we're very happy that you're spreading the word. But keep it going. This is a great thing that we have going here. A lot of good college football to be talked about in the middle of the week, and we're glad to do it. One more thing, we have a surprise coming out within the next week or so, so keep your eye out on our Twitter, Facebook. It'll be obvious whenever it comes out, but we're excited to reveal the surprise to you.
Oh, also, before I forget, special thanks to Stephen Pangestu, new editor of the podcast.
Yes, fantastic addition.
Yes, meant to shout you out earlier in the pod. Sorry about that, Stephen. But everybody, be sure to give him a follow on Twitter. He's doing a great job for us. We got a great weekend of football ahead of us. Be sure to send in your questions, and we'll get to them next week. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks, guys.